Marion, good to see
Lyn.
you on the BWA podcast show. We've got an hour of absolute power together as we delve into high-performing teams. So thank you so much for being with me in our virtual studio of Business Women Australia. I think you're my innovation inspiration. You were the first one who came on board with me when we streamed across Facebook, LinkedIn and YouTube. Would have been over a year ago. I think it was during COVID, actually. So
Wow.
yeah. So thanks for being back in the studio with me today.
Absolute pleasure. And that's way too long for us to be having another conversation.
It is, and so much has changed in the world, and there's so much optimism and opportunity around us, while at the same time so many challenges in terms of the global financial issues that are impacting on us, and issues at home around homelessness and high inflation and all sorts of pressures. But in amongst that, you and I are eternally half cup full people. So for those of you who are not half cup full, you might just want to tune out now, because we're going to talk about some pretty awesome stuff going on. Now, for those of you who don't know Marion, your life is so much richer for being here with us today and being able to tap into her expertise. She's the managing director of Azolla Holdings. She's a member of boards. She's an innovator, a speaker, and a writer. And I think personally, she's actually a bit of a fashionista as well. So I've got some awesome pictures of Marion on panels with men in suits. And she's in something amazingly fluffy and awesome. And I just love everything about her, because she's really got that balance of the feminine energy and the masculine energy that we all often need to be innovators. So thanks for being here. I'm going to kick off today just getting you to tell us, what do high-performing teams do differently?
Absolutely. And firstly, thanks, Lyn, for that amazing introduction. I always feel like if you're going to be visually different from everyone else, you might as well rock it out as much as possible and totally embrace it. So absolutely, the white fluffy jacket. I actually get people asking me to wear that jacket to meetings.
I love it. I want to borrow it, but it's yours. It's yours. Everyone will think I'm just being a copycat, which I do.
It's okay. That's the greatest form of flattery. So what do high-performing teams do differently? Well, I love high-performing teams, and they actually do have a very different mindset and a very different way of doing things. And did you know, Lyn, that when you type in Google the phrase, what do high-performing teams do differently, Google comes up with 2.74 billion results in 0.55 seconds. It's insane. And I think it just shows what a hot topic it is. But really, what this very complex issue boils down to is this. Workplaces are micro communities. They're essentially a smaller set of the larger society in which we live in. And high-performing teams understand this, and what they actually do is they find ways of leveraging social connection. They go beyond trying to recruit the right person and ensuring that they have the right skills and tools to perform the job. And instead, what they do is they create genuine opportunities for people to bring their authentic selves and develop authentic relationships. And they do this by focusing on purpose and culture, and are very value-driven towards their customers. And they do this in a number of ways. The first way they do this is they focus on value. So they create value in everything that their people do. And they see this as how they engage their people. So firstly, they leverage diversity within the organisation, and they create a truly inclusive workplace. So everyone can bring their full selves to that workplace. And they also look at flexibility to suit people's needs, so they can bring their best self as well. They also understand that everything is an experiment. I think sometimes we like to think that people have all the answers, and that's not exactly the case. I think as we go on in our life journey, we realize no one really knows what they're doing and they're just making it up as they go along. But they take these cues along the way or signposts that show that they're on the right track. And so they understand this, and they understand that nothing is certain. So what they do is they focus on solving for customer problems. And by focusing on customer problems, they not only generate value, but people actually can see the value that they're bringing and the purpose that they're living within their workplace. Because the reality is we spend so much time at work, we actually want it to mean something. They also take an agile approach. So I talked a little bit about uncertainty before. And so what they do is they see if things are working or if they can actually improve what they're actually doing. And they use a human-centered design approach. So I think a lot of times we get caught up in methodologies and tools and we academize the workplace. But the reality is that as humans, we're designing for other humans. We're solving problems for other humans. And we forget about the fact that this is a human world in which we live in. And we forget about that behavioral side of things. And I guess the last thing that they do really is there's this ability to scale and translate. So what do I mean by that? They have this can-do attitude around problem solving. So there's a solution for everything. And so they focus their social capital on solving for focused challenges that they think are going to be most impactful. And they reimagine and recreate the experience for how it can be better for everyone. And by everyone, I mean both internal and external stakeholders. They continuously improve and they have the courage to look deeper. So a lot of times we get caught up in the white noise of what we think the problem is, but they actually have the courage to ask more questions to really understand what's going on so that they can generate better insights. And in doing so, they can continuously deliver impactfully. And by that, I mean they not only generate those insights, but they can also make things happen and they bring people along the journey. So they create that buy-in by not only their internal stakeholders, but their external stakeholders as well.
So that sounds like a lot of work from a leadership point of view to build and enable a culture that's so human-centered when we're really focusing a lot on technology and AI and bringing in sort of efficiencies that are coming from those kinds of change management programs in our organizations. So why does it matter? Why should we be spending time on doing this? I mean, I'm going to have a lot of evidence-based colleagues that are going to tune into this that'll be thinking, oh my goodness, it sounds like, we're going back to sort of something that's very people-y, high resource heavy, time consuming. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, so I guess there's kind of like 3 questions in that. Thanks, Lyn. So the first question really is around the technology side of things. And look, the thing that I would say about technology is it's an enabler of the business. So I think a lot of times people get caught up in the technology and the shiny new things and trends that are coming out, like AI, like bots, like automation. And absolutely, there's a place for all of those things. But we need to be clear about what that is. And so that's where this people side comes into play. I think sometimes we just take people out of the equation and we just think very clinically about what needs to be done. And we forget about, well, how is this actually going to generate better value for the people in which we're delivering those services to? And what are those outcomes going to actually look like? And we see lots of organizations invest millions of dollars in technology, and those things fall apart because they haven't actually done the work in who's it for, what's the problem it's trying to solve, and is it actually appropriate? The second part to your question, I'm going to get to the people side in a minute. It is quite challenging because we are all very complex, but this is really a way of working. So I think some people seem to think that these things are in addition to what they're actually doing. But what we actually see is the best results is if this is your actual approach to how you do things, as opposed to being seen as the additional component. And so kind of tying that into the last part of your question, which is why does it actually matter? So if I break this down into two components, the first component being the business and then the second component being the people. If we have a look at it from the business point of view, it's really important because people are the greatest asset of an organization. It's usually the biggest cost as well. And there are costs incurred, in terms of training, in terms of recruitment, in terms of getting people to the point in which you want them to be in order to perform their best. And one of the interesting things is during COVID and post-COVID, a key challenge for leaders was they realised that upwards of 40% of their teams might actually be leaving their jobs. And we term this the Great Resignation. And we're still seeing that today. And we know from COVID a number of things from the research that was undertaken, that a top strategic priority for business leaders was the challenge of retaining their workforce. And post-COVID, there was a significant increase in resignations and job hopping. Essentially, COVID gave people the time and energy to really think about, what is my purpose? Am I living it? Can I be doing something better with my life? And when people were asked what they cared about most in the workplace, they answered with things like feeling trusted to get the job done, creating a sense of purpose, maintaining good relationships with my manager, and continuous learning and development. And these are all things that high-performing teams and organisations focus on. So from a people perspective, when they were asked why they resigned, they said things like, good people are leaving the workplace because of a lack of inclusion and a lack of respect, i.e. toxic workplaces. People wanted to get a sense of belonging and connection in the workplace, i.e. a lack of inclusion. And essentially, people don't want to stay in workplaces where they feel they don't belong. And so one of the important actions that can be taken by organisational leaders and managers, and they are two separate things, is create a more fair, inclusive and equitable workplace. And the research shows that there are 3 psychological needs that are essential to building extraordinary workplaces. They are autonomy, competence and relatedness. And when people feel psychologically fulfilled, they are healthier, happier, and more productive. However, the last of those things, i.e. relatedness, is actually the trickiest out of all 3 to create. And that is the key differentiator with high-performing teams and organisations.
And where does rewards and pay and incentives fit into all this?
Yes, because we all like to be given a bit of a pat on the back. And this certainly does come into play. And what we see in high-performing teams and organisations is that it's not necessarily a pay increase that people are looking for, but it is recognition. And it is a key part in high-performing teams. And part of that is around telling the narrative and the story and then backing it up by what's actually happening. So a lot of times we see organisations focused on data, on meeting their KPIs, on the volumetrics, and we see less emphasis placed on the stories or the qualitative components of what's happening, and yet they're the most impactful. And so what we see high-performing teams do is a mix of both, and they actually do provide feedback to their teams around, what's working really well, and also people who are performing really well, because that's how you reinforce the type of behaviours and the type of outcomes that you're looking for. And that actually helps people maintain their productivity and, in fact, increase their productivity. And many times those individuals will actually step up and continue to perform regardless of what's going on around them.
There's so much in this, we've only got an hour together. So what I'd really like you to share is, for those of our listeners who are really stepping into this new world of leadership and really building organisations that are focused on the right environments for growing high-performing teams, what do they do? What do they need to be doing to become a high-performing organisation?
Absolutely. So the first thing is to design with purpose. So as I said before, people are all about why am I here? What is the purpose or value that I am delivering? So design with purpose and show their overall contribution to that purpose. And part of that is that feedback that we just talked about. Share real life stories about how what they're doing in their everyday work is creating impact for their customers, both internal and external, because that helps to reinforce the behaviours and the outcomes in which you're looking for. As I said earlier, organisations tend to measure their data side of things, but this is really about the stories that are created because of the work and the impact that that work is actually having, and that is so powerful. Purpose needs to be woven into the fabric of the organisation's culture. And instead of rewarding ideal workers, encourage people to bring their best selves to work. So when people bring their best selves to work, they're going to produce higher quality work, and they're going to be more productive, and they're more likely to stay longer in the workplace.
It's an interesting challenge, isn't it, really? It's terms of, these are great concepts, but sharing real life stories, what are the best ways for organisations to share real life stories?
Yeah, so there are many ways in which to do it. I'll give you one from a personal experience. So I was leading a team of graduates who were pulling together COAG briefing notes. So for those who don't know what COAG is, it's the Council of Australian Governments. It is where all the premiers from the states and territories meet with the Prime Minister to talk about issues of national significance. And what we found was that we coordinated briefing notes for the Premier across a multiple range of varied significant issues nationally. And we were basically required to be the quality control people. We also developed our own briefing notes for particular things as well. And I remember one night in Canberra, we were having drinks, and the Premier at the time came over and he said, "Marion, I have to tell you, before I used to get these huge files of briefing notes and I could not make heads or tails of what it was the issue was and what I was supposed to do. Your files and the team that put these files together, this is amazing. It's clear. I understand the issues. I know I can navigate what needs to be done. And even better, it's succinct and it's in this small file." And so that was such great feedback. And when we went back and did the debrief with everyone, it was the key feedback that we gave to my team, who was responsible for pulling that together. And they were just so chuffed because they got a lot of resistance from other teams for being very particular about how things needed to be presented and the type of information that was going into those briefing notes. But it was because we always had our end customer in mind, which was the Premier, and we always had in mind what he needed, how he needed it, and the conditions in which he operated, and the need for these things to be succinct and very focused on the issues that needed to be addressed within the 20 or so COAG agenda items.
It's so powerful. I mean, it's the concept of Theodore Levitt in Marketing Myopia, has put the customer at the center of everything way back at the beginning, the grandfather of original marketing thought. And it's great to see this kind of thinking actually pervading into every aspect of an organization where all the stakeholders are customers of each other in a process. So when you were talking originally about quite often with technology and AI, we're sort of getting a bit carried away with that, sometimes forgetting the customer. I was on a website recently just trying to get some information about the team, about the company, what they stood for. And this chatbot kept jumping up and all these other things kept zooming in front of me. I couldn't read anything. I ended up having to get off the website because it was just so in your face and I couldn't get it off. I'm going to get rid of these things. And I was like, this is AI gone crazy. This little chat bot's it's just got rid of a customer.
You need to create your own little AI so they can have a discussion together and just tell me the answer at the end.
So I can read the website. This is classic because I just thought how interesting it is that we've almost rushing the experience and not letting people just land, have a wander through the shop, have a little look at the team, pick up some products, have a little feel. Obviously it's an online experience, so it's a virtual experience but they're not giving me time. I felt like the retail store, when you walk in before you've even had a look at anything, they've been pounced by a couple of people. It's classic. But yeah, so getting back on track then. So tell us a little bit more about your experiences leading organisations. You've got experience across government and across enterprise. So you've been in both the public and the commercial sectors. So you've had a good range of deep experience with organisations really looking to innovate and looking to be high performing, to be the best and the leader brands in the spaces they're in. So give us some of your personal experiences around that.
Yeah, and look, the reality is it doesn't matter if you're a public sector organisation or a private sector organisation or not-for-profit or even academia. Yes, there are certain, cultural mores within each of those things, and you have different customers. But the reality is there is commonality for high-performing teams across all of those things within the context in which they all operate. I think sometimes we all get caught up in, well, we're really different and unique. And it's like, not really. The reality is that we tend to put those things in place so that we can validate the status quo and the operational structures that we put in. But most of the times those things are no longer fit for purpose. They might have been at a particular point in time, or they may have been put in place in response to an event that happened. But we very rarely have the time and space to go back and actually review and consider whether those things are still purposeful, and think about how we might reimagine a better way of doing things. So to give you another personal experience, one of the things that is important to note here is that high-performing teams aren't necessarily a group of the smartest individuals or the highest performing individuals. And I think sometimes people recruit for that. But the reality is that can in and of itself create significant challenges because a lot of those people are very alpha, and they have probably been told most of their lives how smart they are, and that can cause other issues within organisations. But the research shows that high-performing teams is more about how people collaborate and work together, and that really is the key. So To give you an example, and this is probably one of the greatest examples that I can give you, is during my time as the acting CE, so Chief Executive and Interim Government Chief Information Officer for the state of Western Australia, we were faced with a very interesting point in time where we had a 40% reduction in staff numbers and we were unable to recruit. And that was mainly because we were going through machinery of government changes. So we were moving from one organisation to another organisation. We just had a change in government as well. So there were several reviews being done around the office and its impact. And we were still required to deliver several significant whole of government reforms. So you can imagine lack of capacity and still needing to deliver a number of reforms. And this was something that the minister was very focused on and committed to do. And we also needed to repair a number of agency relationships as well. So they had certainly deteriorated over time. And we also had to salvage a key reform, a key government reform that was around an industry relationship too. And you can imagine that's a very complex scenario. And yet the team stepped up and delivered on all of the above and more. I remember when I left, I was writing an email congratulating the team and celebrating the success of what had been achieved. And I started to list out all of the achievements, and it was insane the number of things that that team had delivered, despite that climate in which we were working in, which was very challenging. But when I reflected on how and why we were able to do that, there are a number of things that fell out. The first one was we had a very clear focus and we had a very clear purpose. And that was all embedded in the culture of the organisation. And that was a foundation that we laid at the very start of the journey. So when a lot of people are talking about organisational structures and number of FTEs and caps and so on, and all of that's very important, I was there saying, well, yep, that's all fine. And yes, we need to do that. But more importantly, how are we going to operate as an organisation? What is the culture in which we're going to create here? What are the values and the purpose we're going to focus on? Because that is going to set the scene for everything that's to come. And the people that were attracted to working within the Office of Digital Government were attracted to it because of those things. And so it was aligned to their own sense of values and purpose, which meant they were very committed to delivering despite the challenging environment in which we were working in. We were also able to leverage the skills that people brought with them. And I don't mean the skills that they're necessarily recruited for, but their whole skill set that they come with. So if I think about the diversity of the group at the time, it was incredible. We had over 40% of people that came from very different disciplines. Most people would think that for a technology-based organisation, it would be full of tech heads, but it wasn't. We had people who were philosophers, who were artists, who were sociologists, who were environmental scientists, and so on and so forth. We had over 40% from a different ethnic background, which was amazing because they brought a very different lens and very different experiences. And we had over 50% gender diversity as well, which was fantastic. Again, something you don't see in a technology-based organisation. And being able to leverage that. So, for instance, with our policy documents, it wasn't just all words. We all know that there are very different ways in which people consume information. We leveraged our artists to create really impactful visuals around what it was we were trying to achieve through those policy directions. In terms of ethnic background, we were having to translate some of these documents in other languages, and we were able to leverage the skills of the people within our organisation, such as translating something into Italian. but modern and contemporary Italian, which I think is a really key point. We also had a very agile way of working. So we brought cross-functional teams together to focus on specific challenges, and we prioritised the workload against different horizons, looked at the capabilities required to deliver on those particular priorities and the gaps that we had, and then we brought in people from across different teams to be able to fill those gaps over specific periods of time. So we got rid of the whole organisational structure. That's still important, particularly from an HR perspective, but we created a very flexible workplace that were focused on the key challenges that we were trying to solve. And every time we had a win or met a significant milestone, we celebrated those things, which goes into the work hard, play hard. So we created time and space to socialise and forge deeper connections. That's that social capital and social connection that we were talking about. So yeah, you know, we every now and again we went to karaoke. In fact, people still talk about the karaoke night to this day. And we had really fun morning teas that also fundraised as well. There was one where we all had to paint at least one nail a particular colour. So all the girls brought in nail polish and we were all like painting each other's nails, including the males in the organisation. It was a lot of fun. And lastly, we took a growth mindset approach. So this was all about ongoing learning and development to create better results, a real focus on innovation. So finding new and fun ways to achieve those results, and letting go of things that we thought were important but no longer served us if we were working towards a better way of doing things. And that last point is really quite critical because, as I said before, sometimes organisations are so focused on what it is they currently do and they don't necessarily take the time to review those things to see if it's still purposeful. So if I had to kind of wrap all of that up, it would be this, Lyn. Are you a Trekkie? Do you like Star Trek?
I'm not really a Trekkie. I'm probably more a Star Wars person.
That's okay because, you know, you're still sci-fi, so that's fine.
Only because I was in the country and we only got to go to the drive-ins and I don't think we could get access to Star Trek.
I do Star Wars and Star Trek, but my analogy here is a Star Trek one. So hopefully there are some viewers out there that are into Star Trek. But essentially it's this. Everyone can perform, everyone can belong, and everyone can reach their potential. And that's what high-performing teams do, is they create that environment for those three things to happen. And everyone challenge themselves to do better and be better. And they collaborate around key challenges with a focus on social capital.
It just sounds like the ideal utopia in terms of a workplace. And, you know, it's hard, I think, for a lot of leaders at the moment, making that transition around the new world. You know, we have some of our people coming back into the office. We've got some organisations where staff are refusing to come back into the office. We've got a mixed environment where, you know, some of the people I'm talking to are really enjoying the fact that their teams have the opportunity to work from home and come into the office for a couple of days a week. It's changed the whole landscape since the pandemic, and the realisation that we can actually have meaningful collaboration across digital platforms. So what are you seeing as the challenges there, and what are the ways to solve those challenges?
Yeah, it's a great question, Lyn, and you're absolutely spot on. Post-COVID, there are additional challenges around creating social capital within the workplace, thanks to the use of technology. We're seeing high-performing organisations be agile around that and flexible around that too. I think sometimes we focus on the fact that the whole corridor conversation and water cooler conversation is no longer there, and that's where the innovation happens, which is part of the drive for some organisations to bring people back into the workplace full time. But we go back to that issue around flexibility being one of the key things that people are looking for. And one of the reasons why people are leaving the workplace is because they do want greater flexibility. So that, to me, seems to need a balanced approach around that. And we're seeing some organisations get quite creative around maintaining social capital. So one of the things that we've obviously seen people do is a hybrid approach where people are allowed to work from home, one or 2 days a week, and they obviously have to be quite clear and structured around what that actually is. Secondly to that, we're seeing people use technology in different ways. So I've seen a group of people that actually get on Zoom or Teams, and they create that connection through the use of technology that they would have in the office, where they're actually working away together, but they actually have the Zoom up or the Teams meeting up, and that creates that same kind of social connection, but using the digital enablement to do that. The key thing here is that high-performing teams still do things slightly differently with the use of technology. And the key thing around here is communication, and that's what they do. So they communicate, and they communicate in ways that actually work for them. So they're not afraid to get on the phone and have a conversation with people that they need to have a conversation with. I think sometimes we think the old telephone is, an archaic piece of technology, but it actually does a lot of things. If you're communicating verbally on a telephone, it does things like you don't have to worry about tone, which you would in an email or messenger. It also enables things to get resolved quite quickly because you can have that 1 or 2 minute conversation or 5-minute conversation around a particular topic, whereas it would take longer if you're typing it out. And so they actually look at these little efficiency hacks, and it doesn't have to be the latest and greatest technology, but it's around how do we communicate quickly and efficiently, and how do we communicate for meaning as well, so that we can actually get on to doing what we need to do, but still maintain that social connection as a group. And in some ways, and I've seen this with my husband's work, so he works for a technology company based in Silicon Valley. They do some really cool stuff because they're all over the world. They still need to create social connection. So they do things like having little mixes, where they get a gin and tonic night, and everyone kind of dresses up in their most tropical fabulousness. And they have like their gins and tonics and their little sprigs of rosemary and burnt oranges. And they sit there and have a bit of a yarn over mixing gin and tonics together. So there are different ways. We just need to be creative about how that happens within a hybrid or fully digitalized workplace. And that's what high-performing teams do differently. They don't stop at, we can't do this because we lack social connection, or we don't trust our people, or productivity. We have this assumption that productivity is going to decrease. In fact, we all know from COVID that isn't the case, because the productivity increased and everyone's now burning out. But they go, okay, well, if this is what our people want, how might we actually create a workplace where this can occur, but still maintain the awesomeness of the things that make us a high-performing team? And that's how they resolve those particular issues. And perhaps if people are actually looking at this, that might be one of the key challenges that they focus on with their group, is they co-design a way in which to actually achieve that, noting that it might be iterative. There may be things that work really well and things that don't, and they tweak along the way.
And that's really part of the important part of embracing an evolving organisation too, is recognising that it's constantly changing, constantly evolving. Now, I just want to touch on some of the issues that you brought up there around around bringing your best self to work and being able to explore and work in a way that you're bringing and you're elevating your best self and bringing that all the time. And I was reading your LinkedIn profile in preparation for coming on here, and there was something in here that I really want to read, because it's going to put this in context too, in terms of where I want to go with this conversation. So Marion's focus on evidence-based strategy and advice is a reflection of her multidisciplinary training, translating to clear decisions that will have traction with customers. A lifelong learner and a natural affection for curiosity means Marion is genuinely interested in her clients' challenges and co-designing with them solutions, especially to complex problems. She uses contemporary methodologies that turn the same people solving the same problems into new solutions. So using the same teams, like not having to bring in a whole bunch of external people in to come up with new thinking and new opportunities. This is the bit that I'm really want to dive into as well, is that you believe there is no longer a separation of work and life. It is just all life. So herein lies the challenge for us to be able to bring our full selves, to be able to harness and work with our existing teams when they're already stretched with their day-to-day tasks, and sort of business as usual sometimes gets in the way of having the space to innovate and co-design to bring about better organizations and higher performing teams. How can we navigate that, Marion? It's a massive issue facing all organisations and the managers and leaders in those organisations equipped with this task.
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is you need to create the time and space. So the reality is that the BAU is always going to be there. That's why it's BAU. It's business as usual. And you're always going to be doing it the same way if you don't create the time and space to think about how it could be different. And we see this time and time again, not only with our clients, but I've certainly seen it in my 20 plus years of working, where people get so frustrated with their own processes, and they get so frustrated with the suboptimal outcomes that are being delivered, but they just don't do anything about it because we're too busy. And the thing that I would say is, well, you're your own enemy, because you're actually creating the inefficiencies in that process, and you're creating the suboptimal outcomes. And the only thing that is going to change that is you. So you have to create the time and space to make that a different experience for everyone. And that small upfront investment of time and space will have longer lasting impact and create better dividends for you and your customers going forward and into the future. And it's really about reimagining and redesigning what those experiences are like. Some of the people that are listening to us have heard me tell this story before, where one of my early work experience was around land use planning. So I used to be responsible for about a third of the state in terms of an approvals process, statutory approvals process for development. And it was a team of one. It was me. And I was not the first person, obviously, in this role. There were multiple people, and it was, quite frankly, the worst role in the office. No one wanted it because you worked long hours. You got abused on the phone by developers for taking so long. And we certainly weren't meeting our statutory timeframes because we were seeing everything. And I remember in the first week, I was like, what is this? this is insane. I couldn't see my desk. I couldn't see the floor around my desk because it was piles of files all around me. I was getting abused. I was getting calls from different government agencies and developers. And I was like, I can't live my life like this. There's got to be a better way. And so, and quite frankly, I cried. I remember going into the toilet one day and just crying, going, this is ridiculous. And then after I wiped away the tears, I was like, there has to be a better way. And so I went, okay, why do we have to see everything? And from that point, yes, I could have easily been like everyone else and gone, well, this is business as usual. This is the way in which we've done things. But I was like, this is not a way to live. And it's certainly not meeting any of our customer needs. And everyone's frustrated, including me. So let's actually spend some time to actually do this better. Yes, it's going to take longer, but we're not meeting our statutory timeframes anyway. And so I started with, well, how do we have to see? Well, I started with the question of how might we reimagine this process? And then it went down to, do we have to see everything? And so going through this process of questioning and having a look, and yes, there was some data. Yes, as a scientist, I'm all about data, but I'm also about the experience as well for everyone. We realised that we weren't commenting on 80% of the things that came through. We were having to generate a letter that went no comment and send it on to these external people. So it's like, why do we have to receive these things? So we actually, in the end, got rid of 80% of the applications that were coming through. So I was like, yeah, that's a win. But as you know me, Lyn, I'm like, I'm sure we can do more. So what's the next tranche of things that we can get rid of? And so then we looked at the things that we always put the same conditions on, and what were those conditions, and under what context did we put those conditions on? And was there a way that we could set up a memorandum of understanding with those particular agencies that said, okay, don't send us these ones. If you're going to send us these ones, these are the conditions we would put in these locations. However, we still want to see these ones because they're complex. So we got rid of the next 10%. So by the end of this process, we were only getting about 10% of the original number of applications. And that 10% were those strategic, high-value development applications that we absolutely had to see. And let me tell you, life was so much better after that for everyone. We were getting letters written by developers basically saying, thank you for being so efficient. We received our clearances within a week, and we kept getting these letters, which was amazing. But that wouldn't have happened if we didn't take the time to actually focus on how we might be able to do this better.
So it starts with the imagination of the human brain and the capacity for us, and to be able to reimagine is really something at this stage we can't give to AI. I did ask a chatbot recently their opinion on something, and they did very clearly say to me, this is not my opinion, but the research is showing this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And I was like, wow, this is so interesting. Within 2 minutes, I was getting kind of like a summary of the state of play here and now on that particular topic. But it doesn't imagine what it could be. And what I found the other day, we had an online roundtable with women from Queensland and few of us from WA, just sort of problem solving each other's kind of challenges. And it was phenomenal, the different brains around the virtual room there and the different things that people came up with. So the ideas were so much richer and diverse because there was a group of us. And each one of us came away with lots of different ideas to go and investigate that we wouldn't have come up with on our own. So I think this is, you've given us so many great nuggets, gold nuggets to take away, and to actually think about how we implement this in our own organisations, whether we're large corporations, publicly listed companies, government agencies, small businesses. Even if you're a sole operator, but you're working with a couple of contractors, this is a great opportunity to bring into the the design sort of planning stage and think about business planning in a much different way than just going through your financials and thinking about your revenue streams and working backwards like we do so well, but actually saying, hang on a minute, how can we be a high-performing team? How can we be a high-performing brand that is actually customer-focused and continually understanding and evolving as our customers' needs are evolving, and coming up with solutions, maybe in cooperation with our customers, to be able to design what we can then develop and then scale. So, it's very exciting for any organization, no matter where they're at. So just to leave us with some takeaways for our listeners, what would you like to sort of to leave with us today to take away?
Absolutely. And I guess kind of tied to that, and responding to what you just said, Lyn, absolutely, this has to be the way in which we operate going forward. And it doesn't matter if you're a privately listed company, a public sector organisation, a not-for-profit, academia. We all have customers. And the only reason why we exist is because we serve those customers through the products and services that we give to them. And we obviously have to make sure that that's done in an effective and efficient way. But we all have customers, and they're both internal and external customers as well. And so that whole being customer focused is really what actually separates those people, organizations and teams that are high performing and that are perhaps less so. And so what that then means is essentially this. Firstly, your people are your greatest asset, and people know that. The only way you get the work done is by having people. And I know you talked about AI before, but AI, might very well do certain things for us, particularly around, your great example of pulling together the research. But there still needs to be a human eye that goes over what has been pulled together to see, is it appropriate? Is it feasible? Would people still desire what it is that we're actually considering doing? And the other thing I would say is, don't take your people for granted. We've seen the impact of COVID and people leaving the workplace where they're unhappy because of a variety of reasons, including the lack of purpose, the lack of feeling like they're delivering value, the lack of a good workplace culture, of which being included is part of that. And that's such a huge cost to the organisation. So your people really are your greatest asset. Leverage all of which they bring to your organisation, because you will get some really great additional benefits in doing so. And they also feel valued because they can bring their whole selves to work, because you're leveraging everything, including their passion. The fact that like I said earlier, we had an artist. He was so chuffed at not only being able to use his writing and analytical skills, but that he was able to use his creative side as well. And take the time to really think about your workplace culture and values and purpose. And we all have a strategic plan, but sometimes we don't walk that strategic plan. We all say, we want an inclusive workplace, that, we deliver results and we get things done. But that might not actually be the case. And really think about how to create more social capital or inclusivity in your workplace. So how is it that you can actually create those deeper relationships, have those deeper conversations to generate better insights? And, your point earlier about working with your stakeholders is key to that, because people are actually going to be doing the work or making the changes. They need to be brought on that journey and felt like they've been heard and had input. And sometimes they bring the greatest insights. A lot of times when new initiatives or strategies or planning happens, it's with the top tiers of an organisation. But sometimes they don't know what's going on the ground at that coalface with the customer. And that's where your greatest opportunities are. So being able to be inclusive allows you to actually solve for those customer problems, and not what you think the customer problem is. And then actually leveraging your social capital across the organisation to look at how to solve that through a design process, I think is really key to that. And absolutely, at relevant points in time, bring your external customers in and test, because not only then do you get to validate and iterate what those things are, they also have some great insights as well. A lot of the work that we've done with our customers and clients have demonstrated that there are things that they haven't thought of that their customers bring to the table that make it so much better, because you've got that diversity of thought, experience, and skill set that's happening, which generates better results. And the other thing I would say is sometimes we get caught up in poo-pooing people's ideas. So when they come up with ideas, everyone goes, oh, that won't work. We tried that before, or that won't work because, that's a stupid idea. I would say there are no stupid ideas. It's all about the and. So if someone has an idea, you don't want to stifle the creativity by saying no. You want to open up the creativity. And even if someone has the most ridiculous idea, it might actually be the best idea, because if you go, okay, well, let's actually look at this. If we were going to make this happen, what would it look like? And we've seen lots of our customers do that and come up with the most amazing, innovative results that actually generate so much enthusiasm within the organisation, and people just get on board and they get it done. And it's just so fabulous to see, because people are so invested, they can see the impact, and they feel like they're valued, and that they're actually doing something good, which is fantastic.
It sounds brilliant. And look, I'm sure that anyone who is listening today is going to be taking away some great ideas, whether they're listening to us, we're live streamed across Facebook, across LinkedIn, we're across our YouTube channel. We'll be holding this recording on our YouTube channel, and we will be wanting to bring it into our BWA website as well. So thank you so much. It's been wonderful having you. How do people find you? How do people find you if they want to have a chat to you about engaging you into their organisation?
Absolutely. So they can find me on LinkedIn at Marion Burchell. I think there's a LinkedIn link on the wonderful BWA flyer that was put together. They can also contact me by email, which is mburchell, burchell, at iinet.net.au. Or you can check out our website, which is marionburchell.com, where you can also see that lovely fluffy jacket that Lyn absolutely loves.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. We always get so much from listening to you, and we will look forward to having you on not such a long break between now and the next BWA podcast show, as we delve into all sorts of things around our leadership and how we can actually make the most of the opportunities for our organisations to be the best they can be. So thanks very much, Marion.
My absolute pleasure, Lyn.
It's so good.